So, still good morning, everybody, and thank you for your attendance. It's nice to be here. Thank you for your time. My name is Atul Athavale. In the first slide, let me introduce myself a bit, and then I will go in the topic of digital sovereignty. Myself, I'll say is Atul Athavale. First quarter of my life, I spent in India. I have a bachelor's degree in physics from Indian University. The second quarter was in Germany, where I studied at the TU Darmstadt master's degree. And then the whole life is still ahead of me. Why I'm mentioning this on this slide is because I have seen those two words, I know what the sovereignty means, because those are two very sovereign different words. And I also know what beautiful outcomes it has when we collaborate or cooperate between those two sovereign words. And that is the sovereignty. And that also goes in the languages. So for example, if you know multiple language, every language is a sovereign, but still you need to translate or communicate between different languages to have the better communication and better result. In my current job, I'm working at a Munich Research Center of Huawei, where I'm leading the team of engineers who are looking after the data ecosystem and the sovereign infrastructure or the federated infrastructure work streams. Before coming to Huawei, I had an opportunity to work with Airbus Defence and Space and Deutsche Telekom. So throughout the career, it has been always the multi-stakeholders, different cultures, different sovereign groups, which I was able to bring together, work together. So that's why there is also a personal note to the topic, the digital sovereignty, the sovereignty and how to collaborate it and how important that piece is. What I thought of today's agenda is first we will talk about data collaboration and digital sovereignty. Then we will go very briefly in the framework of digital sovereignty. So and especially I'm very proud to say that Europe is a pioneer in this area, and it has a complete framework to guarantee and secure the digital sovereignty. And then I would like to introduce two prototypes. The one is Bootex, which is focusing on the data portability, data sovereignty. And the second one is Expanse, which is basically the cloud service portability. Just to make this talk a bit more interesting for the public that we have, I would like to know what the background of you guys is. Who is working in the area of cloud? Okay. Who is working in the area of data or data-related sovereignty topics? So, cool. What is your background, if I may ask?
I'm providing runtime and development environment to the developers within our company.
Thanks for the background. And even there, the collaboration is important, and probably you will work with other companies as well, where you would like to share the data, share the code, share the software, and probably there the sovereignty plays a role as well. We will see in a couple of minutes whether it matches the needs. So these are, you have seen definitely these pictures before. In 2006, the Huawei made a definition or proclaimed that data is the new oil. And it was very much true. And in 2020, Team O'Reilly said that data is a new sand. And this one is true as well. And this is the journey that data has made. In 2006, the main focus was on exploring the data, getting the data, collecting the data, processing it, and then bringing it to the work. So that was the analogy. Now, in 2020 onwards, the data is available in vast amount and at vast varieties. And what is now important is how we can process this data, how we can collaborate. And you know, if you process the sand well, you can make a glass out of it, which is much more value than the sand itself. And if you do it really, really good, you can make a chips and silicon out of it, which is much, much more value than the glass and the sand. So this is the analogy, and this is where the data is going in 2020 onwards. If you reflect this in a graph, you know that it started with a data warehouse. So data was basically a byproduct of a production process. You collected the data, you put the logs together, you analyze the data later to have the better efficient production or the quality control and those things. So this is how the data science started. Then data was used to make the decision support, where you have a monitoring dashboards which guide you how you can influence your business processes or the production processes. Then we move to the age of automated or decision making, where data is used to make the decisions using the AI machine learning algorithms. And now this is where we stand today, roughly. You can shift it left or right a bit. In the future is federated data collaboration. That means different companies, those have data, they will bring that data together, but still federated, because everybody has understood that data is value. You can generate money out of data. And so everybody is ready or willing to collaborate the data, but the value needs to be extracted and needs to be transferred back to the data owner. So this is where the data will move ahead, or the data collaboration will go ahead. Then we are coming to the topic of digital sovereignty, or the sovereignty indeed, and what is the needs of this digital sovereignty. The first one is pretty obvious: state autonomy and the security of national or regional data and infrastructure. So there is nothing to add there. It is well known and well understood. The second point is, which is much more important, especially in this fragmented, sovereign world where every region wants to be sovereign, but still the supply chains are global, production chains are global, and still it is a need to exchange this data. And there, the economic autonomy and the computation are the key needs for the digital sovereignty. I want to own my data, but at the same time, I want to share it or collaborate it to generate value out of it. And the third one is user autonomy and individual self-determination. This is where also the Europe has been a pioneer with the GDPR, where we are saying that every user can decide what happens with his data. What we are focusing in this presentation is mainly on the second point, that is the economic autonomy and computation. So if you consider a very simple build, this tells the story about the data sovereignty. The data owner has the data. He can decide what are the usage policies for that data. It can be a price tag. It can be the permissions. It can be permissions to copy the data, or use the analytics of the data. And then data plus usage policy defined by the data owner becomes the data asset. And data asset is the packet which generates the value. And the importance of a digital sovereignty in respect to the economic autonomy is that the data owner should get his value back, or should be paid for his data asset when he shares it in an ecosystem. And I postulate the journey of this sovereignty, data sovereignty, or the infrastructure sovereignty by design will be as follows. In 2019, we have seen, especially in Europe, initiatives like IDSA, that is the International Data Spaces, or the Gaia X, which are mainly focusing on making the data and the underlying infrastructure independent. So we have seen the IDS reference architecture, which provides the sovereign data sharing capabilities, but the main focus at that time was monolithic data containers. So you need to have the predefined data formats. So I can say that I can share a Word document or a PDF document between the different parties. I can ensure the policy enforcement. For example, this data will be shared for 30 days, or it can be used for 3 days, and after that, that data will vanish. So it was happening within the container, and only predefined formats were possible to share among the different participants of a data ecosystem. In 2022, the IDSA version 4 came out, which has a pluggable connectors. And this is also what the Catena X is using, because Catena X has 10 predefined use cases. 3 are the top priorities, what they are focusing on. And with a pluggable infrastructure, this is possible that they can define how the data will be used and what data will be used. And if they need to add any extension, a new format, they can use it using the plugin. When we proceed further, the dynamic use cases with a dynamic data formats will be added towards it. This is one of the topics what we have in our prototype, and I would like to give a very quick introduction at a later stage. So the formats need not to be the predefined. It can be dynamically defined, but still you have to define it based on the use case. Further we go, by 2025, I postulate that there will be intelligent ERP systems which will have this data exchange or sovereign data exchange plugins inbuilt. For example, the big ERP system which has almost 70% market share. If it has a plugin where different companies can share the data sovereignly, the whole efficiency of this production and procurement processes will be much easier, because 70% of companies using the same ERP system. That ERP system is intelligent enough where the companies can define, I would like to share this data for the collaboration, and whenever there is a value generated of this data in a collaboration, the value or the revenue should fly back or should come back to the company or to the data owner. So this will come around or emerge around 2025. By 26, 27, I believe there will be the W3 standard. The activities are already started. The example is data space protocol, which is also hosted in one of the Eclipse projects. And the basic idea there will be, it will be just like a DNS, what you see today in the internet. Whenever an individual or company shares a data, it shares associated policy with it. So the data will be shared with the policy, and whoever wants to consume it, he will just do something similar to the DNS request, will ask who is the owner, what is the policy, how I can use it, and once he uses it, consumes it, collaborates it, the value goes back to the data owner. So this will start emerging by 26 and 27. And the data will be something what you have today. Internet is free-flowing, but then it will be possible to get paid for the data by default. You don't need any special infrastructure to have this return of the data ownership value. Coming to the next topic, the framework of data sovereignty. And as I mentioned at the beginning, the Europe is really a pioneer in this field, and it has a full stack. The European Union started with a strategy of open and portable data and cloud services. This is the exact form of what the strategy is. It can be multiple pages, but this is what it comes together. At the same time, they have started in implementing the European regulations, which will support the strategy. There are three main acts that I would like to highlight. That is the Data Act, which is focusing on the data portability. The Data Governance Act, which gives the data owner the right to decide what happens with his data. And the third one is the Data Market Act, or a Cloud Act, which will then allow the cloud service portability, that the users should able to decide what happens with my data, where it will get processed, and how I get back the results of this, and how I guarantee the data portability. So the data owner will be at the end who will be deciding that how I want to get my data processed, and it should be possible for him to move it very easily and quickly among the different cloud providers, infrastructure providers. It can be the public cloud, it can be a private cloud, it can be the hybrid cloud. The portability should be very similar. After having the strategy and starting the regulation initiatives, the European Union is supporting the technical specifications, which will be the de facto standards. You have probably seen the Gaia X initiative. You have also seen the lighthouse projects like a Catena X, Manufacturing X, and there are altogether more than 30 or 40 big data spaces projects which are moving ahead to set the de facto standard in these data spaces. The Europe is going one step ahead with the global standards. There are already 2 working groups started, the one in ISO, that is International Standardization Organization, and the second one is a CEN, so to say the European equivalent of the ISO, where there are working groups which are working on a draft, what will be the standard for the trusted data transaction, basically data exchange platform, or the data spaces in the ISO. On top of that, the European industry and the European Commission is supporting the adoption of this sovereign data exchange in the different exchange platforms. And you can see about the domains which are already active. For example, in health, in automobile industry, Green Deal, mobility, automobile sector, the Catena X. So you have a full spectrum. Not only the strategy, but the required regulations, required specifications, standards coming off that specifications, and last but not least, the industry adoption, where the industry will be able to implement this. Being said that, you see in the Gaia X, there is this X, which is for the cross platform or the collaboration platform, and it has 2 different colors. At top, you see the blue color, which is for the data ecosystem, and at the bottom, the red color for the infrastructure ecosystem. The idea of the Gaia X is to provide this digital sovereignty in full end-to-end circle. Not only the data, where the data ownership is there, but also the data owner should be able to choose which infrastructure this data runs on. The same logic what we have explained a couple of minutes before. Looking at this, so what is happening is the strategy is open and portable data and cloud services, and to allow this technical specifications and upcoming standards to make it more tangible, we have built 2 prototypes in an open ecosystem. The one is directly hosted at the Eclipse Foundation, which is called Expanse. This will focus on portability of the data, portability of the cloud services. And the first one is Bootix, which is available as an open source, not hosted in any open source foundation yet, but the plan is to put this also in the Eclipse data components, that is the EDC, which is again hosted at the Eclipse Foundation. The main idea of the Bootix is to provide easy-to-use Gaia-X compliant testbed for the prototyping. So it is a platform where every industry player or whoever wants to try it out can easily download it, install it either on a public cloud or on a private infrastructure, and start sharing the data. Easy for onboarding, and the most important thing is what we tried is using the off-the-shelf open source industry standard software. So not to introduce too many new softwares or too many unknowns. The only one part which is required for the data sovereignty is this EDC component that is new, but the rest is pretty well-known software and open source software that we are using, so the players can try it out very easily. And the second one is, the third point was demonstrating a real-world tangible use case. So I will go in an example in a minute. So that platform can be used for the multiple use cases, and the use cases that we have built, I will explain in the next slide in a minute. The Expanse itself is allowing the cloud portability for the software vendors. So the software vendor can decide, I want to provide a managed service on any cloud provider, just like the cloud provider himself is able to provide. So you probably know that all 4 or 5 big cloud providers, they have a catalog of managed services. For example, managed database, managed Kafka, managed Kubernetes, and all that stuff. And this should be possible for the software vendor to utilize this and provide the cloud native experience for its end users without reinventing the wheel and using the existing cloud and their backend APIs. Are there any questions or any comments till now? We can also take the questions or comments at the end. So this was the practical use case that we have chosen to demonstrate the power of Bootix or the usefulness of this kind of federated data system. You know that Europe, there is a law for the supply chain, and it is coming in steps. In the first steps, all companies who have more than 3,000 employees need to comply with this supply chain. And in a nutshell, what the supply chain law says is the person or the company who is bringing a product to Europe, he needs to be accountable for a complete supply chain. For example, there was no child labor involved in a production of that product, or there were no environmental hazardous processes were involved while this product was developed. And he needs to make sure that this is, first of all, checked, and he needs to make it verifiable for the European Commission or the standardization bodies to check that this has already been made. This will be applicable for 1,000 plus workforce companies from coming years, and it will be affecting more than 50% of the companies which are active in Europe. So this is a real problem which is on the horizon. The one way could be the distributed gathering or the central gathering of all this information from a complete supply chain. This as the main problem is, first of all, it is a lot of efforts to gather this information and put it in a central place, and you need to manage it IT-wise, the login, the security of that data. But the most critical part of this is a business problem. No supplier wants to give, or no supplier wants to give his customer a complete chain of his pre-suppliers, because then he is making himself redundant. And that is the main challenge to having this centrally. So we need a federated solution where everybody will be able to upload or to flag that this data is available, and should be able to make this data available only to the right person for the validation. So nobody should have the complete visibility of a supply chain, otherwise he will have the business advantages. And this is the idea of using the Bootix project in a real world use case. For example, a car manufacturer is procuring a car seat from a seat factory. The seat factory itself is procuring the fabric from one supplier and a plastic car seat, which is required to build this car seat, from other procurement. The complete chain needs to be compliant. In this example, they are using the boutiques as a platform. Everybody has a certification for their product saying that this was compliant with whatever standards are valid. And they will just flag in this data space or in this exchange platform that I have a required certification. They don't need to upload this, or they don't need to provide the information at a central place that who everything is involved. They will just flag it. And the authority who is responsible to validate the supply chain, they will crawl down in a supply chain without others knowing whom they are crawling, and will gather the information as required. And the supplier themselves, they will decide with whom this data need to be shared and who is allowed to use this data to what extent. And this all will be managed using the EDC, the Eclipse Data Space components, where the policies are defined, and the data will be shared only between the party who is willing to share the data and to the party who is, the party has allowed that with this party the data could be shared. So data transaction will be only between the two mutual parties, although the information is flagged in a data space. So this is one use case that we have built using the boutiques project, which is also available at the boutiques boot-x.eu as a information and the architectural diagram, and also the source code is available there. So this was regarding the data sovereignty. And the second part, what we have is an expanse, which is available at the Eclipse Foundation. And this is exactly what the idea is. Take an example, the XYZ software vendor who wants to provide the managed service. He will have a one API against the expanse where he needs to write his deployment scripts. The expanse itself will take care with its plugins that this will get deployed in different cloud providers, which are supported by the expand in the backend. And then the end user will have a unified or a homogeneous experience of a cloud. So all services which are covered with the expanse will appear in the cloud as if those are native managed services provided by that cloud service provider. The advantage for the cloud service providers is also in the domain where they don't have their own managed services service catalog. They can use the they can use the contributed or the open source service catalog and just deploy those in their cloud services. That will increase the IS or the infrastructure consumption and the cloud consumption for them. So it is basically the win-win situation. The analogy is somewhat what you have today in Apple Store or in the Google Store, where the different application developers develop the applications, get deployed on any kind of platform, and there is a well-known revenue share model which is available to distribute the value generated through it. So this has been the pitch, the digital sovereignty, especially from the economics and the competitiveness analysis. It is important that data remains portable, and the cloud services or the infrastructure, it remains portable and movable as well. With that, I'm at the end of the presentation. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm open for any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, Atul, thanks a lot for your talk. I have been around in this topic now for, well, about a year, and had a couple of discussions and been in some of these rounds where those topics are being digested, and often I find that the active members, the active players in this topic, like Huawei and Eclipse and our organization and manufacturing inks and public organizations are actually providing already technology and frameworks for actually enabling data collaboration. And what we often lack, or we feel is lacking, is actually use cases. So we're actually providing everything and it's ready, but nobody's asking for it. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but ideally or ultimately it should be the other way around, right? Somebody's asking it, then technology providers provide something, and ultimately if there is no the lift off, then all these initiatives are going to die. And I'd like to hear your opinion about is there something we can do, or how can we actually start leveraging that industry and other players are actually starting to ask for a solution for data collaboration because they need it?
Thanks for your question, and absolutely valid question. And as you have started the question, it is a difficult to answer. So the adoption is the challenge. But I will take it this with an analogy that we have. So the first point is the industry is showing a huge interest and huge investment in these kind of topics. That's why we are seeing the Catena X, Manufacturing X with the big names who have participating in it and also have formed joint companies to push it forward. The one reason why the adoption is not as fast as expected is it is a complex topic. And I will relate this something similar, why the cloudification in Europe is a bit lacking behind compared to the Asian or American markets. What I see the main reason is, in the last 30 years, the European industry has concentrated on their core business only, although it is a good thing that they have concentrated on the core. So the automobile manufacturers will produce the autos, the pharma industry will produce the pharmaceuticals. And this IT has been classically outsourced to the IT service providers or system houses. So the system houses are the one who need to drive this adoption, also to bring this connectors or the new concepts in the IT of the big companies or big enterprises. And this is not looking or not clear enough for those guys. What is their value proposition once they deploy it? It will be the service-oriented industry again, so they will be paid for their services. But this is what is kind of blocking or kind of slowing down the adoption of these kind of concepts in the industry. And the second thing is, everybody knows that this is a wow, this is something great, but nobody knows how exactly to implement it. I will compare it somewhat with a YouTube or a Facebook. As YouTube or a Facebook came in the market, nobody believed that this will be the multi-billion company. Everybody was thinking that, oh, they started with $100 share value, and it will crash in a couple of years, but we have seen in 10 years. So the value of the technology or the value of this usage is still need to be proven. That's why the company, everybody believes that it is there, but it is not proven yet. So that is why the companies are a bit slow. But once it starts taking pace, it will accelerate, or it will be adopted exponentially in all the industries. This is bit crystal ball reading, bit assumption, bit reading, so a combination of all.
For my tasks, they are not about data, but more in the supply chain. And the term sovereignty, to me, I do understand this as sovereignty of the supply chain provider regarding using third-party libraries, open source libraries, open source software. In the Java world, I have joined 3 years ago. No one actually is using open source, but binaries. There, most often, or meanwhile, usually, there is a source jar file around for whatever debugging, but not for being able to recompile this source and verify this binary is built from this source. And so there is, no design concept. There are concepts around, but they are not implemented in the Java world to always be able. Does not mean necessarily to actually perform, but to be able to recompile everything from scratch, from across the whole supply chain, across the whole stack. And when there is this for one thing, this is I have learned yesterday in some legal talk. I'm not a lawyer or something like that. That as a provider of services, I'm responsible for the libraries I use, for the software I use. But when I'm responsible for them, I really want to be able to recompile them and perform controls if some authority comes and wants me to prove everything's correct. So, yeah. While this is not about data as you mean here, actually the source code for some packages data as well. So there is still a process or a way of this data how to get into production.
Thanks for the question. That as you have mentioned, it goes a bit out of the scope of the digital sovereignty or the data sovereignty, but I see the problem or the challenge what we have is very similar. What I will define this as a software production process or software production supply chain. So even that can be validated using the same mechanisms or same standardizations, not the processes, not the technology or not the tools, but the standardizations showing that who owns this piece of data and whether it is possible to reuse it, and how we make it sure that the ownership is intact and there is no alteration. And not in the context of this, but in a Huawei Munich Research Center, we have a team of guys who are working exactly on this, a distributed compilation. So the idea is you can use the source code. The compilation is cached in between, and only the change part will be then recompiled and cached with others, and everything is fingerprinted or certified, whatever is coming from which source code and how it is compiled. So there is another research or development project which is going in that direction. If you're interested, we can talk it after the call. I will be more happy to provide the more information to it. But it is an IT product chain, it is a supply chain, and the logic remains the same, but the tools that those are required to ensure this are a bit different because it is coming from the software industry. Thank you for the question. Are there any other questions? All right, then thank you very much for your attendance and great questions. Wish you a pleasant day and a good EclipseCon. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.